watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
I'm a political cartoonist. Political cartoonists are the only people, the only journalists who are allowed to lie. Right? No, it's true. A political cartoonist can take the head of his country and put it in a cartoon and put words in his mouth that he never said. And that's allowed. You know, I can put up a cartoon of Bibi and have him say, I want to chase all the Arabs out of the country, right? If I was a columnist and I wrote that, they would come back and say he didn't say that, and he got to print a retraction. But if I do a cartoon saying that, well, that's fair game. As a cartoonist, I'm allowed hyperbole, I'm allowed exaggeration, I'm allowed to say I'm reading his mind, this is what he really means. And therefore, when people do cartoons that are clearly anti-Semitic, you say that's anti-Semitic, and the guy says it's not anti-Semitic, you're just a right-wing supporter of Israel, and therefore you're calling this is hyperbole. So the question becomes, how do you know if something is anti-Semitic? How can you prove that? How does this work? Quick look at anti-Semitic techniques in political cartoons. Seems to me that there are two basic ways that anti-Semitism is communicated in cartoons. The first I call moral inversion. Okay? Moral inversion is when you take a victim and you portray the victim as the tormentor and portray the tormentor as the victim. That naturally leads to Jews as Nazis. Instead of Jews having been the victims of Nazis, Jews in fact are the Nazis. And in which mass movements for world domination portray Jews as world dominators. So if you have a movement that wants the whole world to worship the God Allah, seems to me, if you believe in Allah, that's a righteous cause, and that you should go around and telling how wonderful Allah is and the benefits of the religion. If instead you seek world domination by intimidation, by killing people, then that's not good. That's moral inversion. Demonization is the second part of the dual thing. One is with demonization. Jews are drawn as subhuman demons, and Jewish symbols are presented as demonic symbols. Now, these techniques exist not today. They go back to pre-Christian times. We have early carvings. We've got middle-aged woodcuts. And the same two techniques of moral inversion and demonization are consistent. So I'm going to show you cartoons. Everything that I'm going to show you has been published this year or at most 2 years ago. So first, let's take moral inversion. Okay, victims are tormentors, tormentors are victims. You guys all remember this, right? The Achille Lauro. And the thing that you remember about the Achille Lauro is not specifically that they were 4 members in good standing of Arafat's PLO who took over the boat. What you remember about the Achille Lauro is that they took a guy named Leon Klinghoffer who was in a wheelchair and threw him into the sea. Okay? That's the thing, that's the essence that is remembered by you and by everybody in the Middle East. They threw this wheelchair guy into the sea. Okay, that was in the late 80s. Here is a cartoon from 2008. Arab News, it is a Jew in the typical Disturma kind of thing. Actually, he's better looking than usual, although he's got the big teeth. It's important because Jews devour other people, so this devouring Jew image is important. And it resonates. But the people who throw the wheelchair victim into the sea are now the Jews. All right? How many of you know this picture? Okay, most of you don't. In the year 2000, 2 Israeli Jews took a wrong turn and drove into the city of Ramallah. They were arrested. They were put into a Palestinian police station. And then people went into the Palestinian police station, took these 2 guys out of their cell, and physically ripped them apart with the bare hands. And this guy came to the window, I don't know if you can see it, dripping blood. So that's 2000. Here is from United Arab Emirates. These are the good guys, okay? This is clear moral inversion. Everybody knows that picture. Every Israeli, everybody in the Middle East. This is famous image, and it's turned into this. Now the people with the dripping hands are the Jews. We've got the demonic face, hook nose, whatever. We've got the Jew hat with the swastika. We've got, this is like really rich. Next, the idea of mass movements that want to dominate the world, say the Jews want to dominate the world. So here we have sleeping Jew. It says here Zionist, and he wants to dominate the world. And he's got the Jew hat and the machine gun, and he's smiling as he dreams of world conquest. Jews drawn as subhuman demons. So we got this cutie. The inclusion of skulls, massive number of skulls, is also a big signal in the selling of anti-Semitism throughout the Muslim world. Once again, we have this fiendish, non-human, hook-nosed monster. We've got the star, and here Gaza. All he dreams of is death to Gaza. This was, I put down Arab Press because you can't identify what paper ran this. It's all over. And once again, you have the demonic Jew eating babies, right? Devouring, the devouring Jew. See, pointy nails, ears, and he's got a nice skull cap there. And this is the image of the subhuman, monstrous Jew that eats babies. And obviously we grab little Christian kids or Muslim kids and use their blood to make matzah is the number. I've spent half my life in America and half my life here, so I spent 35 years in America, mostly Brooklyn. We had egg matzah, mun matzah, we had onion matzah. We even had chocolate-covered matzah, but there was never any blood matzah. I think that there's an opportunity there with food coloring. We could make red matzah and sell these at high prices to anti-Semites, but look, it's only my idea. Jewish symbols as demonic symbols, okay? So here we have from the Egyptians, our partners for peace, and so of course you have the Star of David converted into a snake. Once again, the gaping, devouring mouth, only now it's being stopped by Kalashnikov. It's being frustrated in his desire to devour everything. This is really interesting. This is a standard recycling symbol. But what you have is you recycle, Nazism becomes Judaism, Nazism becomes Judaism, Nazism becomes, and it goes around and around, and it's recycling history. It's basically saying down through history, the Jews are really the Nazis. Now, I'm a cartoonist, so when I look at a cartoon, I have a serious problem. One is, I never laugh at a cartoon. Because the minute I look at a cartoon, I say, what's he doing? And I see immediately what he's doing. I mean, it's like professional. You don't go back and say, ooh, wow, I'm surprised, because you don't get surprised. You're looking at a mechanism. And so my first thought was, why is he doing this? And with cartoons, you are projecting images. And people get images in a subliminal way. People see things and receive things without intellectually perceiving it. So, the first thing that hit me, that probably doesn't hit you at all, is that the empty space is a Jewish star. See, here's one triangle that goes up, the second goes down. This cartoonist looked, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a star. And the more you look at this, the more you'll start to see that there's a hidden Jewish star in that. Okay? But that hit you the minute you saw it. You just didn't know that it hit you. You thought this was going on, but this is the thing that's going on. Okay? Jews as Nazis. This is from Syria, who America now thinks we could talk to. And once again, we have the gaping mouth. We have the Kalashnikov stopping him from eating the little boy, right? Because we devour children. We've got the Jewish star and we've got the swastika. But there's something in this cartoon that you're not perceiving. And it's really interesting. It's this. See these hairs? You see how his arm becomes black as it goes into his sleeve? You see up here too? That's because the Islamists teach that Jews are not human, that we are the descendants of pigs and apes. So when any of these guys look at this cartoon, they're not seeing an Israeli soldier. They're seeing a monstrous ape, a non-human. We are non-humans. And this is really important to this cartoonist. He's communicating that this is the standard demonic killer ape, devouring, looking for the blood of the innocent, with the typical hook nose, whatever, as accoutrement. But the important thing is down here. Next we have this from Egypt, 2001. This is older than I wanted to, but it was such a cute cartoon I thought I'd include it. This is Sharon and Hitler, buddies. This one is from 2007 in Egypt. This cartoonist is not really very good because he couldn't figure out a decent way to put the swastikas on. So he just stuck them on the hat. Not a good cartoonist, not a good cartoon. What he's saying is, we're not killers, we are Nazis. And once again, we see the beast. These are not human beings. These are the subhuman demonic beasts. So killing Jews is not killing human beings. It's the same as killing snakes, vipers, subhuman. And a traditional theme of anti-Semitism is that these people are subhuman. Okay? So there's plenty of things you could say about Israel, and if you wanted to drive Israel out of the Middle East, I think it would be perfectly reasonable for a cartoonist to come along and say, this whole region worships Allah, and these people here reject the worship of Allah, and we want these Jews out of here. And we're willing to fight war after war to kill them, to drive them out. That seems to me to be a rational, reasonable approach. We could say these Israelis are a bunch of fascists. We could say these Israelis are cruel oppressors. It's not what they say. What they say in these cartoons is that we are not human beings, that we are subhuman demons. This one is neat, because this was from Austria, birthplace of Nazism. And it shows that the way the Nazis treated the Jews is the way the Jews treat the poor little Palestinians. Okay? Classic moral inversion, not done by Islamists. This demonization, this moral inversion is being done by an Austrian cartoonist. Right. This is beyond the definition of chutzpah. Okay? This is by a British cartoonist. Okay? He's saying that Warsaw, 1943, is exactly the same as Tyre, 2006. Okay? What happened in Tyre in 2006 was that the Israeli Air Force targeted some terrorist bases. And that is equated with what happened in 43, when 400,000 Jews were taken from wherever they lived and put into 3 square miles of Warsaw and walled in. And then 240,000 of them were taken to Treblinka, where they were exterminated. And by the end of 43, there wasn't a Jew alive there. And the British cartoonist says, well, this is the same as this. And people who don't know history, people sitting in England, reading this, they say, wow, the Jews are just doing just what was done to them. Jews are Nazis. Okay? So how can you say this is an anti-Semitic cartoon? Oh, I'm just, so I'm exaggerating a little bit. But in fact, if we understand the concept of moral inversion, this is clearly anti-Semitic. This is another one from our Partners for Peace, and once again we have the pile of skulls. And we have Ehud Barak, swastika, and death and destruction raining on God. There are no Kalashnikovs coming back, there's no missiles back, there's no firing, there's simply innocent people, even in tents. I mean, if they did the cities, it wouldn't be as bad. Oh, even people in tents are being killed, rockets, bombs. Hamas had already taken over. One of the first things they did when they won was to start throwing PLO people out of the windows and rooftops, shooting them in the knees and like that. There was a famous incident. Every now and then, some reporter makes the mistake of being someplace and reporting it. So some European reporter made the mistake of saying that these 3 PLO guys who had been dragged out to be shot in the street protested, saying, "We're not Jews." And I did a cartoon about that because they should have said, "We're not Israelis." By saying they're not Jews, it made it look like Hamas was anti-Semitic. Anyway, so here we are. And then look at this one. This shows a really straight Nazi Luga, and instead of a swastika, the star. And what we have is Baba Yar and all the other incidents in which Jews were herded into pits, and the lucky ones were shot before the bulldozers buried the others alive. And you see their hands are tied, women, blood on the walls, no way out, and they're just sitting victims. The cartoonist, who is an Egyptian, didn't bother to show that this is Egypt, because then he'd have to put an Egyptian soldier standing there, and then it would be a binational operation. So it's simply the Nazi Jew killing people. Moral inversion. This is what's going on. And here we have, once again, this bozo also, he's got the swastika, the monster face, killing the poor little baby. What's happening is the Kalashnikov resistance is beginning to disappear. It's not that we are monsters that are attacking, devouring, and they're trying to defend themselves. They can't even defend themselves. This guy, he's just carrying a flag. And This is a cartoonist from Lebanon. His name is Stavros. I had drinks with him in Malta. Fun-loving guy. Gets enough booze in him and he dances on the tables. And so there we were, and, you know, Jews are Nazis. What's anti-Semitic about that? Okay, now you ready for the next one? This is Pat Oliphant in the LA Times. When this cartoon came out, well, I'm going to ask you a question in a minute, so start thinking. Why is there a wheel, and why does he not have a head? Okay, so when this cartoon came out, and people said, hey, that cartoon is anti-Semitic, he said, you're just right-wing supporters of Israel. This is called hyperbole, he said. And I call this anti-Semitism because it meets all the qualifications. First of all, it has the demonization of the religious symbol. Second of all, it has the devouring mouth, going after babies, in this case, poor Gaza lady holding little baby, no fighting back, no Kalashnikov. And then we've got Jews as Nazis. And we've got the boots, goose-stepping along. And because Pat Oliphant is a really great cartoonist, see, it's a sword. But actually, your mind is reading it as a Sig Heil salute. See, if he was after this lady, this sword would be pointed down, and then you wouldn't read it as Sig Heil. This is a goose-stepping Nazi doing Sig Heil. Why is there no head? There's no head because you've seen all the monstrous, subhuman, hook-nosed images. For him to be honest, he would have had to have put this demon head on. And if he put the demon head on, people would say, wait a minute, you're an anti-Semite. So he just leaves the head off. No explanation. Fine, it works. Okay? Now, why the wheel? The wheel is the most important part of this cartoon. Okay? Why? Because this wheel establishes a feeling of weight. This star is rolling on the ground, she's walking on the ground, he's marching on the ground. Okay? If we erase this wheel, and we erase these others, you know what we have? We have a Jewish star with one bar and another bar. This is an Israeli flag. You see it now? When you first looked at that cartoon, the Israeli flag got into your mind. Pat knows what he's doing. What he did was he sat down and he drew one bar, two bars, and a star. And then he said, okay, what am I going to do with this flag? So first of all, the devouring Jew. The devouring, remember we saw the Star of David turning into a snake with the mouth, okay? So we have the devouring Jew symbol, the innocent victim. Then he thought, okay, we'll add the whole idea of Jews are Nazis. So he adds that to it, and it's pretty good, and he's looking at it. I know just how he did it, because this is the way I would do it. And you come and you say, you know, it still looks like a star, still looks like a flag. People are going to see what this is. And then, moment of genius, he puts in the wheel, and nobody sees the flag. But that flag is getting into your mind. And the more you look at this, the more obvious it becomes to you that this is an Israeli flag. When you saw it, it got straight into your mind without your intellect catching it. Cartoonists are able to get under the radar, right? You get under your intelligence, and that way he's able to communicate a really heavy anti-Semitic message, which is disguised as simply criticism of Israel. Okay? Pat Oliphant is the most widely syndicated political cartoonist in the world, described by the New York Times as the most influential cartoonist now working. So this is not some cartoonist. This is America's best political cartoonist. This cartoon appeared in more newspapers and more venues than anybody else's. This is Pat Oliphant. Okay? So it raises a really interesting question, in my mind at least. We are facing a movement that is incredibly anti-Semitic, and not only is it anti-Semitic, it is wildly homophobic. When Ahmadinejad spoke at Columbia, he said, in Iran we don't have homosexuals. And the audience laughed, you know. Well, they don't have homosexuals, because if you're homosexual, they kill you. Homosexuals are not allowed to live in Iran. But that gap of understanding between college kids and the reality of what they're being told was beyond them to grasp. There are no homosexuals. The only homosexuals in Iran are dead homosexuals, or people who are doing their best to disguise it. And so you begin to wonder if a movement is so wildly homophobic, how come there is no gay or lesbian organization standing up and yelling? You would think that would be, you know? And then you say, it's wildly anti-female. You'd think that some women's organizations might be upset about female genital mutilation, the idea that women should walk around in body bags, or the idea that a 40-year-old woman can't go anyplace without a male, even if it's a 9-year-old boy leading her around. The idea of women as chattel, the whole thing. Not a single women's organization standing up and taking the cause. And I figure the reason for this is that as soon as there is a serious genocidal worldwide mass movement targeting Jews, everybody else stands back and says, well, let's see what the Jews do, and let's hope they don't overreact. You've got an Israeli state of 6 million people, of which 20% are Christians, Muslims, Druzim. 80% are Jews, but that's enough. It's a Jewish state. And you have Iran, massive country. Iran says, we're going to wipe you off the map, and we're going to go build atomic bombs. So the world's question is, what will Israel do? Right? There's no question as to what the world will do, because once it's anti-Semitism, the question is, what will the Jews do? And everybody backs off, so there's no women's groups, there's no gay and lesbian, nobody. We got to see what the Jews are going to do, and we hope that they don't overreact. See? So that is the situation we face today, and it's not a unique situation. This is what happened in the 30s, and most people watched the anti-Semitism. FDR was president. There was a massive wave of anti-Semitism all through Europe. That was of no interest to anybody, you know. So the question is, what happened? Last time this happened, we know that 6 million Jews died, but so did 55 million non-Jews, including 20 million Germans died because they said, oh, those Jews, they're dirty, and you know what, they are snakes, they are subhuman. And that was a free ticket. That was the ability to not have opposition from everybody who should have opposed it. Okay? So that should make you either, I say depressed, but people have corrected me and say it should make you angry. After dealing with this, and dealing with the thing when you say Pat Oliphant's cartoon is anti-Semitic, suddenly we discover that there is delegitimization even of the term anti-Semitism. If I say that's anti-Semitic, nobody looks at that. They look at me and say, oh, you're saying it's anti-Semitic? That means you must be right-wing. Okay, so the Yale Institute, the Yale Initiative, is considered by some people, oh, it must be an apologist for fascist Israelis, rather than it's about anti-Semitism, dummy. But the minute you say anti-Semitism, you are delegitimized. Okay? So, first, anti-Semitism is just a buzzword used by right-wing Jewish extremists to defame anyone who dares criticize the Jewish state. Here's a cartoon. Don't bother to read it. I'm going to cut it apart for you. This is a full-page cartoon using a Marvel Comics super character called the Incredible Hulk. So I've cut it apart for you. This is the tragic tale of a liberal, socially conscious Jew. And he turns into a raving maniac. Okay? The question is, how did this happen? Well, he's watching television, and the newscaster makes a remark that could possibly be construed as mildly, see, cartoons can yell, critical of Israel, right? And this poor, decent human being goes, no, my head, throbbing, ah! And he turns from a normal human being into a monster. Hulk destroyed television anti-Semites. See? This monster, there was a remark that was mildly critical, and it sets him off onto some attack. He's using a Mac too. And he's launching an email campaign, and then he's got all these political stuff. He starts hooking up with all the bad guys. He's against homosexuals. He's against abortions, Mexicans. He's like going totally berserk out of his mind. He finally hooks up with Christian evangelicals. Oh my God. And now, suddenly, the veil gets lifted. Oh, oh my God, I can think again. And he dreams of a time when the madness will end. And he can return to a normal life without the beast that was in him. The beast that was in him was, of course, a response to something and saying, that's anti-Semitic. That was the beast. That's a full cartoon. I've shown you every box. Okay? Here's another cutie. This is Phone Sex of the rich and famous. Mel Gibson revealed his anti-Semitism. The ADL condemned him. So this cartoon shows the two of them masturbating on the phone, and they enjoy each other. There's no anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is just something that the ADL and Abe Foxman say in order to remain rich. And so he says, we start the wars, we control the banks, we created AIDS, Darfur is our fault, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't even put the anti-Semitism into the mouth of Gibson. It's, tell me, baby, oh, we're going to get you, you filthy Jew. All right? Okay. Another cartoon. Here, a guy, he says, what warms my heart, no amount of racketeering, wire fraud, or tax evasion, according to the cartoonist, these are Jewish crimes, all right? These are money crimes. None of it gives him the same pleasure as alerting people to the dangers of anti-Semitism. Alerting people to anti-Semitism is even more fun than tax evasion or wire fraud, according to this cartoonist. And it's not a question of Jews and the rest of the world. I was just speaking at a non-denominational church in Simi Valley, and those people get it, you know. And those of us who are uninfected, you know, Ionesco had a play called Rhinoceros. And in that play, there's a little town, and one by one, people are turning into rhinoceroses, right? And eventually, everybody turns into a rhinoceros, and the whole town is filled with rhinoceroses running around. And suddenly, the last man comes up to the stage and says, what do you do when everybody has turned into rhinoceroses? Do you just go along with it, or do you try on your own to remain a human being? And Ionesco wrote it about the Nazis. I had the privilege of seeing it on Broadway. We're facing it again. It's here again. I like to tell a joke about a guy who goes to a doctor and he says, "Doctor, something's wrong with me." And the doctor says, "Well, what do you have?" He says, "I see black and red spots in front of my eyes." Doctor says, "What else?" He says, "I hear a ringing in my ears. It goes up and down, up and down. And I also have this bizarre rash on both of my elbows." And the doctor says, "Have you had this before?" And he says, "Yes." And the doctor says, "Well, you got it again." So, you know, we had to face this in the Middle Ages. We had to face this with the Nazis. And guys, I got to tell you, we got it again. And how to cure this illness and whether we remain the last human beings as the rest of the West turns into rhinoceroses, I don't know, but that's where we are. So my question is, do people find what I presented as depressing or angering? Or maybe it's both.
The answer is yes.
Thank you very much. No time for ukulele playing, I'm sorry.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.